Hello folks, well, back at our last destination in the New England excursion, part 2, our last destination. Whoa! That's pretty cool. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. But when we were in Boston, that last destination of the New England excursion, I told you we would be on to unprecedented adventures. And, well, today, that begins our long journey of unprecedented adventures. So what is this place we're at? You saw the race car coming by. This is a world-famous racetrack. This is the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And this is the location at which cars and racers from around the world compete to become the Indy 500 champion. They have this race annually, and whoever wins this gets racing glory for probably the rest of their lives. So it's a huge sporting event. This course is such a grand one. It is over 2 miles long, so it takes a long while for one car to get all the way around the whole track. Now, thanks to this monster of a racetrack, it has led the way for technological and automotive advancements for safety and efficiency. So, right here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, it is so nice that we get to start our grand adventure in this location. And from the title of this raceway, you can guess we are in Indianapolis. This is the capital of the Hoosier state, Indiana. Now, Indianapolis is just the start. It is the beginning of a huge trip spanning 2.5 months that we are about to embark on. Yes, we will on this trip be covering many new states, many new regions. We will be having a grand old time from what's now the middle of July all the way to, I guess, the beginning of October. Yeah, I'm not going to be home at all for months. I keep saying, almost after every recent trip we go on, oh, this is going to be the greatest trip. This is going to be the longest trip. This is going to be the most grand trip we've gone on yet. No, I'm actually here to say that this is going to be the largest, the grandest, the most elaborate trip we have gone on yet, and probably for a long time afterward. Yeah, so I welcome you to the Frontier Americana Tour. Indianapolis is Indiana's largest city, and it's a huge city in terms of population and size, so I don't want to race through the day, get it? Race, because it's a racetrack. Anyway, I don't want to race through the day, because we have a lot to cover here, but think of it this way. Of all the coverage projects, locations that you have seen and viewed on video, I want you to imagine, what was your favorite state? What was your favorite region of the country? Through this Frontier Americana trip, I want you to be open to seeing if your current favorite gets beat by a new favorite as we explore so many different places. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into gear. Get it? Another car joke? And discover what is so special about Indianapolis, capital of the Hoosier state. So when I say Frontier Americana, and we are going to the west, you may be thinking, well, we're in Indiana. That's not really the west. It's the Midwest, not the west. At one point, it was the west. Back when the United States first started out as a country, Indiana, it was in that Northwest territory. It was sort of a frontier on its own. And Indianapolis was that crown city, made and designed to be geographically central to Indiana. And I gotta say, the people who founded this city, they were pretty spot on. Geographically, this might be one of the most centralized, geographically, capital cities in the US. When you look at Indianapolis on a map, you will see how geographically centered it is. It's amazing. By the way, the name Indianapolis simply means Indiana City. So the people who founded this place, well, they envisioned this city to grow and prosper. And it didn't hurt that Indianapolis was centered in a great spot once the National Road, which we talked about in other videos, and the Michigan Road pretty much centered around this city. The National Road was America's first attempt at a superhighway across what was the entirety of the country, and the Michigan Road was, you could say, Indiana's first highway of its own. Even though that was a long time ago and they weren't the asphalt paved roads of today's technology, they were more so dirt roads or trails or something. The Michigan Road and the National Road created this crosshair of transportation. So even though these roads were quite primitive for its time, they were the best they had to offer in the heyday. As these roads were utilized, Indianapolis grew and blossomed to become a transportation and manufacturing hub. And this gave Indianapolis the nickname Crossroads of America. Having translated into the modern day and age we live in today with our modern interstates, it still rings true as 6 or 7 different interstates all cross paths. And of course, how did I forget the great power and prosperity that came to Indianapolis as a result of the railroads. Towards the end of the 19th century, railroads were in full swing, and there was no better place to set up a business than Indianapolis. And that's because it was the center of all these railroads going through the state, going into Indianapolis for many different business industries, such as, for example, the pork industry, pork packing, all over the city. It was a huge industry. I think the third in the world behind maybe Chicago or Cincinnati. Such an industry profited off of these railroads because you could ship your packed pork all across the country from Indianapolis. Now you may have noticed for the last minute or so we have been walking around this huge, elaborate building. Indianapolis is not just known for being the hometown of the world's greatest speedway, but it's also the place where Indiana does its state government operations. That's right. Indianapolis, capital of the Hoosier state, is where you're going to find all these government officials doing their business, from the governor to the state senate. And they all do their work here in this big, grand old building. What do we think of the Indiana state capitol? I will say, it's not very easy to tell on a video, but walking around here in real life, I notice it's not the best state capital to get grand old views from a distance. Speaking of packing, we go from pork packing to packing of the city streets. Indianapolis is a city where you can find a lot of order in the streets, as we'll see in a minute. But there's a bit of a drawback though, and that means that the Indiana state capitol doesn't have a lot of space. Its grounds aren't that extensive, so this Capitol building is kind of in a tight squeeze. But other than that, the building itself, very ornate. You do see the nice dome on top with the Indiana and US flag. You do see all these grand old windows. I am no architect, I don't know what to call all this stuff, but the design, the architecture, it's very fascinating and very fitting for a place where a state does its government business. So let's check out, if we can, the inside of this Capitol building. Look at that. Look at that artistic glass. I love when a big building like a state capitol really puts a lot of emphasis into the colorful design. You know, when you have such stained glass on top, it really casts a nice, vibrant environment, a nice atmosphere when you're walking through. You see, the lighting is everything. When you see all these ornate lights that really remind you of early 20th century architecture and design, oh, it really turns an otherwise, boring governmental office building into a work of art. You can see it not just in the lights, but the wood, the stone. Every little piece of design can contribute to a visitor's experience here. It's wonderful. Now, what are these? I've seen them not just in this Capitol building, but other state Capitol buildings as well. Did this used to be like an old telephone booth for people to ring into the old telephone? Maybe now it's just used for people to have a bit of privacy when they're on cell phone calls. Anyway, I really like this state capitol. Well done, Indiana. You've certainly outdone yourself. This reminds me of the Arkansas State Capitol building, just with a more golden brown color palette. Way to go. This little booth here has a bit of a musky smell. I'm gonna take off and exit the building. We still have a bit more of Indianapolis to cover. It's not just about the state capitol or the motor speedway. Now there's one more thing I should mention before we no longer see the state capitol in our sight. Indianapolis was not the first state capital of Indiana. We went to Corydon, Indiana on our march through the Midwest. That's where the first state capital of Indiana was. It was located in the very far south of the state because that's where the majority of Indiana's first population was before it moved a little bit more north. But although Corydon is no longer the state capital and Indianapolis is, at least we on the Coverage Project still pay our dear respects to Corydon. We are now just a few blocks away from the state capitol, back there, and we approach Indy's most famous spot in the downtown area. In the middle of this grand city stands a marvelous circle. And yes, cars are going by, which inhibits a little bit of the fun factor. But it is still a glorious sight. As you can see, there's this big old monument. Contrary to what most tourists and travel enthusiasts like to believe, Indianapolis is in no shortage of things to do and see. Indianapolis is a city known for its monuments, museums, and other cultural attractions. And in the center of this mighty city stands arguably the most iconic and famous Indianapolis monument. This is the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, in dedication to those in the military who have served. This monument may just be as synonymous with Indianapolis as all the checkerboard pattern designs that you'll see all around this city. You know, for Indianapolis's racing culture. Indianapolis clock. Canals like these are always beautiful, no matter where you go. If a city manages to incorporate a body of water into its central design, well, you know that a city's planning is made out pretty well. Now that canal, by definition, has to be man-made, but it'll eventually lead up into something that is natural. This is the White River of Indiana, I should specify. You name a river after a color that's pretty commonly found in this world, and go figure, yeah, there's probably going to be other rivers named the White River. So, White River of Indiana. This is actually a two-forked river, two different forks going into one very small stem, and then going into the Wabash River, then the Ohio River. It is a tributary of tributaries. But the important thing about this river is that in the flat area of central Indiana, this is their main water source. So the people of Indianapolis and the outlying counties will get their water primarily from this body. Indianapolis is so large it encompasses basically the whole county, and that's the point of what's called the Unigov. So what does Unigov mean? Well, it means that the consolidated city of Indianapolis and its surrounding Marion County are operated by the same governmental entity. Within Indianapolis, we have the Mug and Bun Drive-In, what I consider one of the Midwest's best remaining drive-ins. Now, a drive-in is an endangered thing, so a lot of drive-ins are no longer in existence. And it's a sad thing because it's one of those iconic American staples. Back maybe in the middle of the 20th century, you would see all sorts of drive-ins across the country, but they no longer really operate as frequently. Luckily, the Mug and Bun here in Indianapolis still operates, and they make some great food. Now, I've been told by many sources, if you're going to go to Indiana, get something that resembles, that is emblematic of the state. So I introduce you to the pork tenderloin. This is Indiana's culinary claim to fame. This is what you would have a pounded pork cutlet. And it's a lot bigger than I thought. You know, you have the beef patty, which is the size of a bun or a little less. But this exceeds the bun. It's amazing. Yeah, this pancake of breaded meat really hits the spot. Holds such a savory taste, and it's just the thing you need after a day in the city. That was a great pork tenderloin. Now that I think about it, do you think the industry of pork packing in Indianapolis had anything to do with the pork tenderloin becoming a favorite of Indiana? Today might have been a bit much of a video, but I wanted to start us out with a big ol' splash as we begin our journey through the western United States. This is gonna cover a lot of ground. By the time we're done, I think we'll have like 42, 43 states under our belt. That means we only have a few more states to go after this for next year. But that's all I gotta say. It was a nice day that we finally, after so long, got to revisit this Midwestern state and discover a bit about its state capital, Indianapolis. So with that said, sitting with a full stomach at the Mug and Bun Drive-In here in the outskirts of Indianapolis. More travels to come. I will see you at the next location.